say is that a roundtable is literally that. It's a chance to share some things, some thoughts, ideas, but more importantly, to have a dialogue and a discussion around what are the questions that are sitting with you, and how can we help you to make an informed decision about whether this may be the road path for you. And so what we're going to do, Janine, if you could just go on to the next slide, is really kind of cover a few areas. So in the time we've got together, we want to talk a little bit about the Center for Coaching and its origins. As I mentioned in my first few words, next year we're going to officially our 20th year. So we've been around for quite a while. We've survived, I think it's 4 or 5 deans of this Graduate School of Business. So something we're doing must be okay. The other thing I'd like to do is cover some of the models of growth and development. I think when we first started coaching, certainly when I first started, coaching was this kind of, I suppose, this way of interacting with people that was very different to management or leadership or advice giving or counseling. And I think over the last 20 years, the depth and the breadth of understanding of theory and of research. And that's one of the reasons why we linked up with the business school, because we have a gateway to the latest research on human development. And that's really helped to shape how the course has unfolded over the last 20 years. So we'd like to share some of those with you. The other thing we'd like to do is give you a sense of coaching for development is a journey. It's a passageway that you're kind of joining up to. And I think there are a number of things about that passageway. Firstly, what are the meta stages of the journey? Who are the kinds of people that you'll be working with and also be allied with in terms of buddies and pod buddies and learning partners that you actually work with over the course of this. We'll talk a little bit about some of the process and pedagogy, some of the support processes that we've designed. And as I've said at the beginning of this course, so much of that has shaped, shifted, modified, adapted. And then I think an important part that we'll leave open is, what are the questions and answers? What are the things that you are sitting with that we might help to open up? But one of the things I'd like to share is that we've got a number of people on this call who are our mentors, our co-teachers, and our guides who are also here. And you'll see very quickly that this course has a collective energy. So much of what we do in coaching is one-on-one, but so much of the support, the development, and the learning happens in community. And you'll meet some people this evening who've been with us on their own journey and continue to help on the journey of other people. So I think that's an important part of who we are. So Janine, I'll hand back to you just to talk about some high-level stuff, and then we'll kind of get going.
Yes, okay. So let me first give a short background introduction. Perhaps sometimes storytelling is something we do, the narrative of where we come from and who we are. And I think one of the questions people often ask is, what is the origin of the Center for Coaching? How was it born? And, where did we come up with this? And so Craig, I'm going to talk about you, if you're okay with that, because Craig is
Can I go for coffee?
No, stay and listen. Then you can deny stuff after. Craig, 20 odd years ago, went to the US to study integral coaching with New Ventures West, which is our parent company. And, well, not our parent company, the source of our materials. And when he was there, he realized the power of this type of coaching is really profound. And so his dream was to come back to South Africa and open a center for coaching here. In those days, nobody knew what coaching was, and certainly not in an academic institution. So I happened to be a lecturer there at the time, lecturing in other topics. And Craig came knocking on everyone's doors saying, no, we need a center for coaching. And everyone was like, never heard of this thing. It's got no academic credibility. It's not going to work joining with the business school. But the dean at the time was a man of vision. And he said, all right, as long as you open a center and you take the risk, and the GSB, the UCT, will allow a staff member to be an academic director, so a sort of bridge, then you can open a center at the business school. And if it works, it's great. If it doesn't, then there's no skin off our nose. So low risk strategy. And of course, we were actually there for the very first university to open a center for coaching or any kind of coach education at a tertiary education level. We were the first school to do that. And I think, let me share a little bit what makes that special is that what it means is that we're a center of excellence at the GSB, but we have the flexibility to partner with our international colleagues, to open a Swiss center, to work with our team. You'll see Nico is one of the people here. We have a team of program managers, finance people, and we're here to really, we've created a space and a place that is really special. Because what do? We train professional coaches. We have this 6-month course that you're going to hear, sorry, this one, which is accredited coach training program. And then we also have the year-long program, which comes after this. We also do leadership conversations, all based on an integral philosophy, team and organizational alignment, transformational work, one-on-one coaching, which we do with many coaches or just one-offs, and of course, leadership development work, all based on the fact that when we work in an integral way, we are developing the whole human being. And so it's applicable in multiple contexts. And this is the kind of philosophy and work you will be exposed to. So we've worked in 29 different countries all over the world. We have 2 offices, one in Switzerland, one in South Africa. And we're proud to have been at the forefront of coach education and coach, making coach practical and visible and usable in the world. Primarily the business world, but also in the NGO and other worlds over the course of the years. So that's just some of the people we've worked with, all the way from the NGO space and through to the more corporate space that you see there. So before I close, just to say that we've invited some of our faculty members to join us tonight. And when we get to the Q&A section, I'll invite them to also contribute to the thing, because as Craig said, we operate as a team. But if I can just invite you to just say hello briefly. Nothemba, would you like to?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nothemba Mxenge, and yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've been on the journey with CFC since 2014, and yeah, it's been a lovely journey, and all the best for you in terms of making the decision to join us. That's me.
Thanks, Nothemba. Next on my screen, that's Michelle from Switzerland.
Yeah, hello, hi everybody. Lovely to meet you. Some of you I've had conversations with, and others are new faces, and wonderful to be here as part of this team. It is a beautiful space to work in, and I've been part of the Center for Coaching since 2012, and delighted to be here this evening as well. And as Janine said, I am based in Lausanne in Switzerland.
Thanks, Michelle. And Petsile.
Evening, everyone. My name is Petsile Dlamini. I'm based in Joburg. This has been an incredibly rewarding journey for me, which started in 2015. Welcome to everyone, and I hope to see more of you as you make the decision to join the program. Thanks.
Thanks, Petsile. And then the last thing I'll say before I hand over to Craig is something I say to everybody, is that when I arrived on my journey to learn how to coach nearly 20 years ago now, I was I didn't know I was arrogant, and I thought I was very, you know, sorted out and flexible and all those things. And all I can say is, if I can learn how to coach, you can learn how to coach. That's kind of the message I can say, where I was then and where I am now. This journey does change one. So Craig, over to you.
Okay. So there is so much we could say, but I thought that I would talk about 3 different elements about what do we mean by coaching, and particularly what do we mean by integral coaching. And I think that word is a really important word. Integral is the whole, the complete. And my first career was as a strategy consultant, and so much of my work and so much of my life was in my head. And the 20 years that I've been in coaching has given me this opportunity to explore the other domains of what it is to be human, particularly the heart, but more importantly, the somatic side, the body. What is it that our body has as this incredible pool of wisdom, and where does learning really take place? And so much of the learning that happens as human beings actually happens in the body and in that connection between heart and mind. So there are 3 kind of panels I'd like to, and the last thing I'm going to do is show you slides. I think they're death, especially in a medium like this. So I'm going to draw a couple of pictures, and maybe that'll give you something of the narrative, which is an important part of the work we do in coaching. So much of the coaching work we do is around what is the current narrative of the client? What story are they existing in? And the more important part is, what story could we invite them into? How would that narrative start to shift for themselves? And narrative has been around for thousands of years. So once again, what integral coaching is trying to do is trying to weave together some of the more recent knowledge we've got on things like plasticity and the body work and analysis of the mind that's happening with some of the ancient wisdom. And you'll notice that we kind of really extend across, particularly being in Africa, what is the West, kind of a Western European view, but more importantly, what is an African view, and also what does the East have to say? And I think that's an important part of the integral kind of focus that we take, is what is the whole world and the whole human being that we're trying to understand. So let me draw one picture first. And it's that kind of storyboard picture when somebody asks you in an aircraft lounge or in an elevator, although for the last 9 months, I have not been to one to either. And until they get a virus, I don't think I'm going to go to one anyway. But I suppose that first question is, what is coaching? Or what are you talking about when you mean coaching? And I think the important part is to kind of say that as human beings, when I'm working with somebody else as a coach, I think the important thing to think about is, what's the level of the work I'm doing and what am I working with and how? And I think many disciplines have come before. And so when somebody from a consulting background or some schools of therapy, or for example, some ways of doing counseling, or some other disciplines like problem solving in an engineering context, or kind of data analysis if I'm a financial analyst and engineer. Usually when somebody brings a challenge or an issue or a problem that they're working with, our immediate bias, as in terms of our background and training, is we go straight to that problem, that issue and that challenge. And we find that if we can modify, adapt, or shift that problem, challenge, or issue, we've truly added value. The reality is that that problem, issue, or challenge often originates in the human being that we're working with. So it isn't something happening out there. They have done, said, or been something in their lives of which that challenge, issue, or problem is really only an echo or a manifestation. So if we're going to work with a kind of in a coaching way, one of the first things that we say is that we will not coach the problem, but our job is to coach the person and to build their capacity, their competence, their skill, so that they can actually resolve, modify, adapt, or in some way shift the problem that has been there before. But the more important thing that we're trying to do as coaches, and this is really an important part of integral coaching, is I need to understand how they are thinking. What is it about their way of thinking that has got them to see this challenge, issue, person, or situation as a problem? The second one is, what is their connection in terms of their heart? How do they relate? What is their relationship with themselves, firstly? And then what is their relationship in terms of emotions with that challenge, issue, or problem? Seeing something as dark, problematic, issue-based, destructive, etc., that's going to inform the way I think. If I feel a different way about it, which it's challenging but a possibility, it's a way of growing, evolving, and adapting, my way of embracing or engaging with that person or challenge immediately starts to shift. But the most important part of the work that we do is around the whole human being, which is the body. And as the recent research is showing us again and again, that so much of the thinking of the human being and the processing and the kind of coming to terms with what's happening around us actually happens in the body. If we were kind of a class 2,000 years away in ancient Greece or in Rome, we would be talking about the head and the brain as huge and profound. Now what we're talking about is right-size the impact that the brain has, but find a way that you can ally it with what's actually happening. So for example, I'll give you a story. Somebody came to me and said, look, I'm a senior executive, I'm working with a team, I've been translated from being a kind of sales director into being the managing director of this organization. But for some reason, I can't get things to work around here. There is something about my relationship with people that just doesn't seem to be allowing me. And I think the real challenge for the person is, if you continue to want to be a world-class sales director and try to lead from a sales basis, well, you're going to get what you deserve. So for this executive, what we had to do is to say, maybe you need to start shifting. So we invited the executive into a brand new narrative. So instead of being something like, I'm a fire that burns everywhere, I kind of light the fires and I create innovation, I create catalysm or catalytic events, I create energy around me. What I need to do as the chief executive of this organization is remove myself to a position of thoughtfulness, consideredness. Actually, I've got the time to think and see the big picture. So the narrative I invited this senior executive in is, what if you became the lighthouse? What if you anchored yourself, grounded yourself, and ultimately the captains of your ship, he or she or they who are guiding the ships, the products, the divisions, the industries that you're involved in, they actually are their ship's captains. What they need from you is light. They need guidance, they need inspiration, but they need you to shine a light at the right time in the right place. And often that comes in the form of challenge or question or kind of asking them to reflect or consider or feeding back or playing devil's advocate or doing one of a number of different things that you are not doing at the moment. You're so used to grabbing the bull by the horns and making things happen around you, but that's not what the chief executive of this organization needs to be. And so the work with that kind of chief executive was kind of saying, instead of trying to change how people are, which was the nature of the problem, we need to change you. And so for this executive, how do you start thinking about yourself in a different way? How do you start actually reflecting on the role that you're playing? So that it might involve looking at different models of leadership, some readings on leadership. What's the latest thinking on what a leader does or is or becomes? We also had to work with the heart, because for this executive, emotions and driving by emotions and firing people up, in his language, was the way he did things. But actually what people needed is a much more considered, reflective, thoughtful leadership, which is, yeah, I'm sure you know how to do it because you were the sales director, but ultimately I'm driving the ship now. I need from you guidance and wisdom. And that wisdom needs to come in the form of questions and thoughts. And therefore your emotions need to be moderated. Don't overinvest your own emotions in what you think or feel. And so we had to do a lot of heart work with that executive. The other thing we had to do was change their way of being around the body. They were used to action. They were used to being active, catalytic in some way. And actually, the biggest challenges, so we had to work with this executive with a number of practices, which is create space, step back, let go, be silent in some of those meetings, be thoughtful, ask questions at the end, kind of say to yourself, I used to be in that position. What would I have wanted from a me in my position now? So as you can imagine, this work took at least a year to 18 months to work with. And that's what coaching sometimes does. It's trying to shift a person from an existing narrative of I'm a fire somewhere, creating heat and energy, to being a lighthouse. I'm grounded, I'm much more clear. And then we had to design a series of practices, reflections, and capacities and capabilities. And I think that that's what coaching is trying to do. Work with the whole person, build their competence and capacity. And I think the most important thing is coach the person not the problem. In the early days of coaching, people will bring that problem, that challenge or issue to you. And what we like as human beings is we like being seen, heard, and respected. So we want to do things for others where they look at us and say, I'm so grateful to you. And so sometimes this coaching can be really challenging because it's trying to work with the leader, him or herself, building their capacity so that they make the changes. And often as coaches, we're actually in the sidelines. We're behind the scenes. We're not on the main stage. We're actually in the background. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we find people who've been used to leadership type roles or being used to driving, guiding, creating for people have to learn. They have to unlearn how to be front of mind, front of stage, and almost have to learn how to be, how do I recede a little? How do I actually, instead of telling the person, ask one question, which opens a whole new dialogue for that person? How do I actually use silence in the coaching sessions? Because silence often is a backdrop against which somebody can see what they've said. And then they say, you know, I've said all this to you for the last half hour. You haven't said much, but my goodness, what's coming back to me is I'm suddenly seeing in contrast. And that requires huge courage as a coach to actually hold back. Just when you thought it was time to speak, stay silent for a little longer. And it sounds so easy to do, but these are capabilities that we have to almost unlearn that we used to or once had, and new capabilities that we have to relearn and re-understand. I think that's the first thing to think about. I'm trying to work with a whole human being, building their competence to resolve a challenge or an issue or problem. My job is not to work to solve the issue. My job is to work and build their competence to do that. A second picture that I'd like to go to. And that second picture is maybe a picture which talks about who or what are we working with when we work as coaches. And I suppose one way of looking at that is if I'm working with a human being and the whole human being, we each have a way of seeing the world. And that way of seeing the world informs how we act, how we behave, what we say, and what we do. And that way of seeing the world often is very much like being in, if you were in a very deep well looking up at the sky. What you see is the sky, sure, but you see only a fragment of the sky and only the part of the sky that your vision can give you. And so when somebody has a challenge and comes to you with a problem or a challenge or an issue, what your role as a coach is there to do is to do something very, very different because they've chosen to behave in a certain way which generates a particular result. And ultimately that result, good, bad, or indifferent, basically allows the person to reinforce who they are. And that's what we call first order learning. I'm sure all of you have heard of that. What we're trying to do as coaches is something radically different. We're trying to say perhaps the greatest contribution we can make to that individual is we can work to build what we call their structure of interpretation. So instead of seeing the world in a particular way, perhaps what we can do as coaches is expand that person's structure of interpretation, way of seeing and being in the world. Once they start to realize that, they start to realize that potentially there are other behaviors. Instead of the first behavior, there are other behaviors that they could start to do and use, and those behaviors generate highly different results. And that insight and awareness then begins to inform how they are and how they're thinking, feeling, and being in the world. So if there's one word you think about on tonight's session, it's that powerful word of structure of interpretation. How can I work to allow that person? Because when that structure of interpretation starts to shift and they start to see other possibilities, the most important thing they do is they start building a capacity not to rely on me. And I think that reliance, dependence, and come back to me whenever you've got a problem is one of the things we're trying to do as effective coaches. Can we work to build that person's competence to self-correct and to self-generate so that they actually don't need and rely on me? And it's one of the few professions, I think, where we're trying to work ourselves out of a job rather than work ourselves in. Our job and our success comes from people starting to talk and saying, you have to work with Mary or Joe or Craig, because the work they did for me was extraordinary. And so much of the coaching work that gets sold these days, and as a strategist, I had to learn this very quickly, doesn't get sold through advertisement, first order, kind of, etc. It all gets sold by network, by collegiality, by sharing, by word of mouth. And so what we're trying to do is leave coaches that are feeling, coachees that are feeling inspired. So I think that's another important thing maybe to think about. How can I build that person's capability, not only to see the world differently, but in this form of coaching, we have two things that we work with. The first is that we work on something called practices. Practice is an ancient word. For those of you who've been involved in martial arts in any way, or who've been involved in the theater in any way, or have been involved in many art forms, practice is something that I do to build mastery in something. And I need to do it again and again and again. And so what we're trying to do as coaches is not develop a solution. We're trying to build that person's competency about how they do certain things. So for example, one of the things that I had to work with the chief executive I spoke to you about is the practice that we had to do was what I called a kind of a withholding practice. Before you go into a meeting, think, do a grounding exercise, ground yourself, because you normally are kind of got 101 ideas in your mind. Go into that meeting, and then there's some form of very, very powerful breathing I want you to do. Constantly breathing, constantly, when you feel a sense of excitement, exude that through your breath. When you're feeling a sense of, I wish I could say something, breathe in, oxygenate your brain. So that was the first thing we had to do, is build a practice of holding back. The second thing we do as coaches is we work on something called self-reflections. I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give anyone is, can we help them to build awareness? Because once I am more aware of who I am, how I am and the impact of that on people around me, and I become aware of what's working about that and what's not, I basically self-empower myself with that awareness to actually take different actions, speak in a different way. And I think for most of us, we spend most of our lives asleep. And what do I mean by that? Well, these days we don't drive to work, but we did do 10 Zoom calls a day. And if we honestly ask ourselves the question, how present, capable, and able and alert was I in that Zoom call? Most of us are just thinking, can I just get through the damn call because I got another 5, and then I got stuff to do at the end of this. So self-reflections are things that we do to build our awareness. Stop 2 or 3 times a day. So for my senior executive, it was stop 2 or 3 times a day and ask yourself the question, how often was I interfering, disrupting, or kind of literally kind of sidetracking what was going on? And once you stop 2 or 3 times a day and start to become more of your contribution to a situation, your awareness starts to build. Now, we had a number of practices and a number of self-reflections. And we also did quite a lot of reading as well. But I hope what you can start to see is that this kind of coaching is building the competence and capability of somebody. How can we do that? The final picture I'd like to draw, if this was a 3-story picture, is there are different kinds of coaching. If this is the amount of, if this is the depth to which I go with an individual, and this is the time it takes, I think there is a powerful way of looking at coaching in a diagrammatic way, which is it's inclusive and extending. Basic kind of coaching, which doesn't take much time and doesn't really go deep, is something that we do teach people, which is how can I coach somebody? And literally, when we used to have offices and stuff, it might be called water cooler coaching. Somebody comes to you struggling with a problem, and can you in 10 or 15 minutes hear what they're saying, reflect back, and then ask them to think of a metaphor or invite them into a metaphor that they start seeing other possibilities. That's the first level of coaching we can do. I know how I have 2 kids who've long since left home, and when I tried to do that sort of coaching as parenting, they very quickly cottoned onto it, which is, Dad, we ain't your coachees, just be dad. So that's another thing we need to learn as coaches, is when is this appropriate and not. I think the second level of coaching, which is what we teach on the associate coaching course, Coaching for Development, is kind of saying, how about if we spent a little bit more time with the person, went much deeper, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to kind of build awareness. We're also trying to do an important thing, which is, can I leave competency behind? Something that the person can do or be that didn't exist before we started working together, but was something that we co-designed and co-worked on and co-delivered, which they used practices and self-reflections to build. And ultimately, once they're building awareness and competency, can they start to self-correct? Can they start to say, Craig, that work we're doing together in meetings, I've realized I do exactly the same thing at the dinner table. And for this executive that I worked with, it was extraordinary to see how his relationship with his family changed when he stopped trying to be the sales director at home too, but actually was trying to be more dad and actually listen more, reflect more, question more. And those were some of the impacts. The third level of coaching, where we're kind of going really deep with a person, and it's taking anything up to a year to 18 months, is kind of the kind of coaching that we would call integral coaching. And here what I'm trying to do is I'm actually trying to work on somebody's way of being in the world. That term gets thrown around a lot these days, but actually the first person to speak about being, certainly in the Western world, there were many Eastern philosophers who talked about being was Martin Heidegger, the German philosopher. And what is your way of being in the world? And how can you start becoming more aware of that so that you can start to shift that way? And by changing that way, what starts to happen is who you are, and how you interact. So what I hope I've done in 3 kind of panels is to tell a story about what do we mean by coaching, where and how are we working, and what are the kinds of levels of coaching that we work on. But that's pretty much like scratching the surface. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand back to Janine, maybe to kind of have some questions and thoughts before you carry on, Janine.
Sorry, Craig, are you saying, should I carry on or do you want to stop for questions here?
I think we should stop for a few questions. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. So what questions, thoughts are coming up for people as we pause here for a bit?
Okay, so I will start with my first question. First of all, thank you for this invitation. It is all really interesting and fascinating for me. Many aspects are very linked to my current role, but of course, without a formal certification, and this makes a big difference on trying and attempting to do some coaching and being a coach. My first question is regarding ourselves. So the role of a coach is very clear, and I really like the part of supporting people on building their awareness, understanding. How does it work regarding us? Building, first of all, our awareness, understanding, and then shift to support the others in doing the same. So in which timing and how does this happen, as I suppose it's an important step before we work with others. Thank you.
Yes, Lorena, I love your question. And it points very much to something I'll go into more detail later, but how we teach is, many people arrive thinking that they're going to learn, their focus is on, I'm going to learn how to do this to somebody else. But to your very important point is that before we can do something to somebody else, we need to first experience it. And so your building of your own capacities to be more self-aware, to experience all of this, will happen in a number of ways. First of all, whilst we are teaching, we will do something like this. Craig will, or one of us will share a piece of theory, okay? And then we'll pause, so he won't do 6 models at once. We will do kind of 1 model at a time. And then we will pause and we will do an exercise, a reflection exercise where you apply it to yourself always with a partner. And then already in that process, you're starting to introspect and say, okay, what is my pattern? How is it that I am? This concept of structure of interpretation, what is my structure of interpretation? What do I see? And so we start the process. And even then that's one part. The next part where we do is that the pieces of theory are important, but one of the philosophies underpinning integral coaching is the school of pragmatism. So it's very important that everything you learn about must be applicable into your life or into your coaching. And so we very quickly start you actually coaching each other, and you will receive coaching from your classmates so that you can feel what it's like to receive it. You get the impact of it, which of course you get huge insights yourself. But then also when you actually go out and you coach other people, which you are required to do as part of your curriculum, you have to take at least 3 people on a coaching journey yourself. The reflections you have to do about how it went and what you saw and what happened for you are hugely you see yourself as a coach in a very profound way. That's the second one. And then the third way in which you perhaps you build your own inner work, you do your own inner work, is we put you into small learning groups called pods, coaching pods or pods, and each of you get your own professional coach as a mentor. And these learning pods meet outside of the sessions at least once a month, usually for a couple of hours a month. And that's also where in the small group environment, people take, you know, the things you've encountered, the things you're working with, and we share and we kind of wrestle with it in your work. And there's a huge amount of learning and introspection as well that happens there. So those are probably the three main areas where that would happen. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Zanele, I saw that your hand was up.
Hi, everyone. Lots of familiar faces. I think you've covered most of what I wanted to ask. It was more around the logistics and how, you know, the course takes place. I am looking to explore coaching and also maybe then have a formal qualification to supplement my work. So I think you've answered most of the technical, so a bit more also around the logistics on and time required for the course. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to read the full brochure before the meeting, so a bit more on the logistics around the course.
Yes, of course. In fact, there's a whole section on that as well. So should we go into that now, Craig? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there was just one last question from Christina, the touch on the role of the Enneagram, which is a key instrument. I think the important thing, Christina, for us to think about, the Enneagram is a wonderful, extraordinary, ancient way of seeing human beings. We don't actually teach the Enneagram on any of the two courses, but we use the Enneagram a lot. And what we do advise people to do who are interested and find this powerful is there are many Enneagram teachers around. Go and do an Enneagram course, submerge yourself into it. But we use it a lot. It's just an extraordinarily powerful way of seeing the whole human being. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, no, it does. I just, you know, was interested in, you know, whether you actually, you know, use it as an instrument as part of the course, not necessarily, obviously, you know, teach it in its entirety. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's nice about it is those who are familiar with it, the underlying philosophy of the Enneagram is very aligned with an integral approach. So the concept of human development, and that's something that we feel very strongly about, is we call this type of coaching developmental, because we believe it's not just about, you know, trying to get better where you are now. It's can you actually grow and develop as a human being as well when we work with you. And those who do, sorry.
No, I wanted to say part of my question also stems from the fact that I actually recently, you know, and my husband as well, did the actual Enneagram test. And when the test results came out, you know, it kind of dawned on me that I really need a qualified, you know, professional to actually take me through the results and to, you know, help me understand, you know, what it is that I'm reading. So, yeah.
Yes, very complex. So too complex to do and teach you everything about integral, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there are many practitioners, many of the professional coaches on the faculty would be more than happy to work with you on that. That could be a nice topic to raise, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, well, if there isn't anybody else for now, let me move to the next piece and then we can carry on with the questions. But as I'm speaking, by all means, you can pop a question into the chat just as I'm speaking, if that's easier. But sometimes one thinks of a question and then you forget it when you listen. So if you can think and or listen and type at the same time, you're welcome to do that as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit to Zanele's question about the logistics or how we work. because I feel that it's very important. We spent, well, after we got over the trauma of having to work in a virtual environment, which, remember, we've always our whole lives said, no, the School of Coaching is face-to-face only. It is impossible to teach coaching properly in any other way. So there we were stuck, right? And we thought either we have to stop everything, and yet all our classes had already had module 1. So we then had, we couldn't just leave people. They'd already started their journeys, or we had to find an authentic way that really, really is as good as face-to-face. And I'd like to share with you some of the elements that we do that make this a profound experience for you, although I will not pretend that anything is exactly better than face-to-face. But there are many people who've said they actually prefer this, those who've experienced both. So I'm going to look into two zones. I would like to look into 2 zones, if I can get my pen to work. Here we go. And the first one is adult learning. And the second one is our live virtual approach. Okay, so we've always taken adult learning principles into account in the way we teach, but we went back and we refreshed that. And we said to them, how is it that adults learn in a way where they really remember? And the first thing is that things must be real. It must be your own story. And so to Lorena's point, your development, you're not just learning about coaching that you're going to go and do to somebody else. You are on this journey yourself. It's going to be as much a journey of learning for you as learning a technique. And so that is what makes it also a very powerful learning experience, and you're more able to retain it. The next things that adults need in order to learn, and this is not in order of importance, okay, is safety. So it turns out that if you look at the neuroscience, when an adult feels unsafe, all sorts of parts of the brain shut down, particularly the emotional side, the more attuned elements, the more subtle elements, and we enter into a space where we can only appreciate the larger, the more gross, it's called, the more gross, the less of the subtle. And so what do we mean by safety? Is we make a big deal about confidentiality. We have all sorts of people coming on our programs, sometimes ex-Olympic athletes, people who are public figures, and never once have they felt unsafe or that people would share their public persona. Never mind when you speak to anybody in a coaching context. The first rule of coaching is keeping the confidentiality. So whether you are speaking to each other in a practice session or in your pod, holding that space confidential, and people start to trust that very clearly. There's a tremendous amount of support. So the concept of structure of interpretation means that my structure of interpretation is as valid as yours. You may not understand mine, but then that's your task, is to explore and understand my structure of interpretation. It's not that I am wrong and you are right. So the non-judgment is absolutely critical for you, for each other, and in the way you coach. And then the other thing that people love this is we encourage you to fail. We encourage you to make mistakes. Why? Because you only can stretch your structure of interpretation if you hit the boundary of it. And so in order to hit the boundary of it usually means you've pushed yourself that little bit further than what you know. And so we always go good, because as a coach, you want somebody to have a stuck moment in order to be able to get a breakthrough. We say almost you need a breakdown in order to get a breakthrough. So we are happy when you feel stuck. We are happy when you make mistakes. We say, yes, what did you learn? What did you not see? Let's get excited about it. And so it becomes an incredibly fun environment, but very serious, but also very fun. What else do we do is we anchor this in reality. So we never ask you to role play. This is for real. You're going to bring real topics to be coached and to practice on each other with. And your coachees are going to give you their real lives to engage with. That's a huge and precious responsibility, but it helps you to learn. And then finally, accountability. This is an adult learning environment. You will get as much out of this as you put in. So with the assignments, you have 3 compulsory assignments for which you will get written feedback from your pod mentor, your professional coach mentor, and you have a number of letters that you're required to submit where you don't get feedback, but your mentor reads it and it forms part of the ongoing dialogue between you and your mentor and your pod members. I kid you not, the more you put into this, the more you'll get out. So you can't get away with not doing the work, but those who do the work in a profound way and hold themselves deeply accountable will have a very transformative experience. How do we make the live virtual work though? In amongst all of this, there are a couple of secret things. The first thing is we deal with, well, I think actually the first thing is we have a very high faculty-student ratio. So it's about 3 or 4 to 1. So there'll be maximum 4 students to 1 faculty, which is almost unheard of. But we can actually do this because what that means is that whenever you break away, so you have a little bit of theory, then off you go into your breakout rooms. Every second or maximum 3rd breakout, you will have a professional coach with you in your breakout room. And that's where the real integration happens. So we always say the real stars of the show are not the people who sit at the front or no longer sit at the front, but who talk to the main room. It's what goes on in those small breakout rooms. Very, very important. So that's really there. What else is we have a Zoom fatigue system. So we break every hour for 10 minutes. We keep it engaging and we try and do body practice. So we'll do something like a stretch, or we'll show you something that you can use in your own coaching. So there isn't one single thing we show you that you can't use in your own coaching practice, because you're going to be needed to coach. You're going to be needing to coach virtually as well, even though eventually you will go back to face-to-face. I think barriers have been broken now, and many people actually really enjoy virtual coaching, and they may well come to you for, so you're going to be doing this in whichever way. You'll learn lots of ways. Many people have said they've attended courses all over the world, and this is the first time they've actually had a Zoom day where they don't feel zoomed out. So we're very proud of that. So we have lots of breakout rooms. And this is the other thing. We have the GSB online platform. So this is very important. All your materials are going to be on this online platform, it's a really well-run, sophisticated site. You'll be able to download everything. Everything's in PDF, and the interactive documents that you need to work in will be provided to you in Word. So you have access to everything in real time. And quite often we make changes based on what's going on in the class. We might make an adjustment to something, then you get the updated materials live, in the moment. So it works really, really well. All your submissions are submitted into the online platform. your mentor coaches download it, they do the feedback, and they submit it back up again. And so you have a permanent, well, you have a track record, and we keep this platform, as far as I know, it's at least 2 to 3 years after the course, where you can still access it afterwards. And then finally, yes, the theory. We try really hard to keep the theory to a minimum. So what we do is we send you the material a while before the course, or each module. We say, watch out for this, read that, take note of the following thing. And then we will actually build on top of the theory. We don't sit here and drone through slides that you've got in front of you anyway. Okay, we don't do that. We'll take that slide and say, okay, you've read this now. These are the key learning points. This is the meaty stuff that comes out of this, this slide. This is what we want you to be able to see and notice as we go. So all of these little tricks might sound easy, but we've really pioneered something very profound, so that people enjoy their times. And you get to know each other, because we mix you up all the time. So you're with a new person every time. You have your pod. Sometimes you stay with the same group for a while if you're coaching each other and so on, but you build a community very quickly. So the safety of the community is very, very important. Your network of this group becomes a very important and special, and lifelong friendships are made at a time like this. So maybe let me pause here. I see there are all sorts of questions Craig's running with over there, but is there anything, Craig, that we should bring forward into the room, or any other questions? You're muted, Craig.
Yeah, the challenge with a session like this is, what you don't want to do is just overwhelm and dump information. So I think what we should do is more kind of open it to dialogue, and kind of say, we've talked a little bit about the background, to where it's come from. We've talked about the theoretical basis and the fact that we're talking about coaching the whole human being. And we've talked about, what we've had to learn and go back to school with in this year, which is, how do you actually teach in a digitized way so that it's as impactful for people? So yeah, I think let's open it up to the floor for questions, things we might not have covered, or you want to cover deeper.
Oliver.
Thanks. Thanks, Janine. Yeah, I just had 2 questions. So the one, I think you've answered, because it was to Craig's point around, how can I be present, capable, and competent in this Zoom call? And that was definitely something that I was considering when thinking applying for the course. So I understand that there's regular breaks, and there's the body exercises, and those have been kind of factored in. I guess my other question was, listening to how we're treating the whole person, and it's not just the brain, but it's also the body. The small introduction I've had into this integral coaching approach is that you need to be able to read those body signals of the person that you're coaching. And hence, the reason for sitting very close and sort of monitoring what they do with their hands and all that kind of thing. And I was just curious, like, how do you manage that in the online context, and reading those body indications? And yeah, I'd just like some more detail about that. Thanks.
So maybe it's a beautiful question, because often we live in a multicultural context, and ultimately one of the things that we've realized over the last 20 years is body language is the worst thing you can look for, because on one continent, kind of sitting in this way is a very different meaning to, in one way it's I'm closed down, in another way it's I'm being thoughtful and considered. So one of the things we've had to do over the years is say to people, stay awake, alert, and alive to the fact that your interpretation of the body doesn't necessarily kind of mean that. So one of the extraordinary things when you're coaching online, if you're looking at a full screen picture, is that what you do, the one place you can go to is the face. And the part of the face that you most go to are the eyes. And they truly are a window to that person's world. And so that's what we found. It's one of the things around which, in terms of how is the person looking, where are they looking, what is the size of their pupils, etc. That is a beautiful way of actually understanding and assessing where's that person and how are they in this conversation. And yeah, just something that we are finding new ways to develop is, obviously, because we are not physically co-located when we're teaching in this way. When we were co-located, we could track down to something like, what's the body energy? How's the body energy and where are you feeling it in your own body? But, so that is something that you can do when you're face-to-face for people, with people. And obviously we'd cover stuff like that. But for this domain, the more important thing is, what are those eyes actually saying to you? What is the story that they're actually telling? I don't know if that helps, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, surely.
Okay, so I see, I'd love to chat so Kate, you've got your hand raised, but if I can just answer the two that came into the chat as we were there. So Maleba wants to know, how do we evaluate the evaluations done? I assume you mean of the actual assignments of the coursework that you submit. And so how that works is that we don't do exams, we don't give you a mark, all right? What we do though is that your submissions need to meet a minimum standard, and your mentor coach will work with you to clarify that, and to, if you haven't submitted something to the minimum standard and we give you a sample of what we're looking at, then they will ask you to resubmit. And you will be asked to resubmit until you have submitted to the minimum standard, although most people only need one resubmission. And it's no hassle if that happens. The mentors here, I'm going to open the floor to them just now, will say to you that many people will sometimes misunderstand something or whatever, and then they just give feedback. But the feedback is done in a coaching way, so that you get great learning from what you've submitted, what perhaps wasn't quite right, and then you just resubmit it. And that's what's required. Well, the other thing that's required is you have to attend every hour of the program, because we certify to the ICF that you have a certain number of face-to-face, even if it's virtual, but this is called face-to-face synchronous teaching hours, because we are together in time. We have to register a certain number of synchronous hours where we're looking at each other while we're actually teaching and learning. So you cannot miss a day. If you miss a day, you have to attend one of the other courses to make it up. You can't certify until you've attended every single day of the program. You also have to submit every single assignment to the required standard. But for the rest, it's more about your own journey than some, a mythical assessment evaluation approach. It's less of an academic approach, more of a practitioner approach. The next one, the next question was, is the certification sufficient to work as a professional coach? So it depends what you call professional. So the ICF has termed the word professional coach those people who've studied for more than 160 hours or something, and a year-long program. Then under the ICF, you can do that. So for example, what some of our CFD students have done is they attend our course, which is 90 hours. And then over the years, they attend other courses that the ICF approves, and they can go through an accreditation process with the ICF to first of all become an associate coach with the ICF. And then you can become a professional coach when you have a certain amount of experience and you have done extra training. So can you work professionally as a coach? And answer is yes. You could work professionally as a coach now. You can you can write your own business card. You need no actual qualification in order to do coaching. And I've actually just read an academic paper, which I'm reviewing, that has discovered that there's a vast the majority of South African coaches have no qualification beyond like a weekend grow model course. And they call themselves coaches because they used to come from HR or whatever, and they go out there and they coach. And they say, I coach professionally, because they do it as part of their professional life, all right? So it depends when we say a professional coach, what we mean is somebody who is qualified to a certain level, to a certain number of hours, and with a qualification. What I will say is this course alone is one of the best South African programs, just this one. The majority of our students don't actually go on to do the year-long professional coaching course, because you will see by the end of this one, you'll be better qualified than 90% of the South African coaches out there. This is a very intensive program. It's a huge personal and learnership development process. So if you want to continue on, you certainly can. But there are pathways. You will be a well-qualified coach by the end of this one. You'll be able to sell your services, put it that way, with absolute comfort afterwards. And always there are people who want to get the top qualification, and then you come on the year-long course after this. Kate, I know you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you very much, Ginny. So listening to you talk, it feels, I mean, and clearly the roots are, in a sort of South African coaching course. I don't know how many of us on the call today are based in Switzerland. What is the breakdown between, and maybe you can't give me the exact breakdown, but between sort of the students who are based in Switzerland and maybe other parts of the world and South Africa? So I'm based in Switzerland, and I would love the opportunity to connect, to meet, to exchange ideas with other coaches living in Europe, so living in Switzerland and maybe other parts of the world. So I'm just trying to understand, because there's lots of coaching courses out there, where for me, based in Switzerland, do I have an advantage, right, joining this course versus maybe another course? I hope that's clear in terms of what I'm getting at.
Maybe I could give that a go, Janine. I think it's a great question, Kate. And for the last 6 years, up until this year, we were running an associate coaching course, or a coaching for development, this course in Switzerland. So we were running it just outside Genève, and it was beautiful. The only reason we're not running it for this year, potentially next year, is because of the lockdown situations, the restrictions on travel, etc. But obviously, we're the first people wanting to, as soon as travel and restrictions and the vaccinations are in place, we're straight back to Switzerland. So, yeah, it's a very good question. But we have at least 6 years of kind of students that we could hook you up with, and that could start to become your network. And we obviously have a branch in Switzerland as well that could guide you and connect you up to people. I mean, it's really frustrating not to be able to travel, but what we thought is, rather than just shut it down, let's globalize the course, offer it to anybody. And we've got people from the United States, other parts of Europe coming into the course, whereas previously it was run on a geographic basis. But hopefully in a year to 18 months time, we're kind of back in Genève as well. Yeah.
No, that's great, Craig. And yeah, I mean, it definitely answers my question. It's just always nice when you have colleagues who are down the road, as opposed to, 7 or 8 hours away by plane. So thank you.
Absolutely. Surely.
Maybe can I invite Michelle, our director in Switzerland, to perhaps also speak to that?
Yes, so yes, I'm based in Lausanne, and I'm not sure where you are, Kate, in Switzerland.
I'm close to Zurich, but I actually went to university in Geneva, so I'm more French speaking than German speaking.
Okay, and we have actually, yes, we have quite a few of our past students, of our alumni, are based in the Zug area as well. Plus we have people based in the UK. We have a pretty active alumni community, and we also, part of what we offer is masterclasses afterwards, after you've qualified. And those are great opportunities to get together. Of course, this year a little different, as Craig said. But that sense of community, there's definitely, we've been here 6-7 years now. There's a strong sense of community that we'd be able to link you up to, and that you would be part of. One of the gifts of being online, I would say, is the richness of the diversity, which is, so there's the pluses and the minuses of both, and the diversity of the different nationalities, and that is fantastic as well online. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Michelle.
So maybe to add to that, I was just thinking, Petsilia and Nothemba, you've been listening in. So from your side as co-leads and faculty, what else, what have we not said yet that you'd like to add?
So I'll go because I also have to drop off soon. I think what I want to emphasize is the pod, which is the small group that was alluded to earlier, where you do have access to a professional coach that's there to mentor and support you along the journey. And I think that becomes quite useful and something to lean into, the group itself as well as the coach, because in that context, you're able to actually go through in more finer detail what your experiences are, the difficulties you have with the theory, its application, even when working on assignments. Some pod mentors have actually scheduled sessions that are geared to support the delegates with their assignments, to give them that additional support and clarify any confusion or misunderstanding that might be there. And I think, again, in that small group environment, it's not always about the teaching. There's a lot of connections and bonds that can be created there, because there's an opportunity for you to open up to each other around what your own personal experiences or the unraveling of this journey is bringing forward. So in a sense, there are deep connections that are formed within that small pod group. Yeah, just that to emphasize.
Thanks, Betsy. And Nothemba, from your side.
Yeah, I think for me, Janine, I just wanted to reinforce, I suppose, the surprising richness of the online platform, because we got to experience it with 3 different CFD groups. And the feedback that we got, I mean, yes, it was the first time this year, but the feedback that we got compared to, I guess, having experienced face-to-face sessions was actually quite surprising. And I suppose part of it was because of the nature of how the program is run online, is that you almost get to be in contact, almost in direct contact with many faculty members, but also your peers. Whereas maybe in face-to-face engagements, you would choose who you would want to work with. But in this platform, with the way that is actually organized, you really actually get to really connect deeply with your peers, as well as have a lot more engagements with more faculty members, which I thought really enhanced the richness of this platform. So that's what I wanted to just reinforce, that it may seem like a bit of a difficult way to learn, but the way that it's been designed has actually even surprised me, who was skeptical in the beginning.
Sorry, I have a very logistic question regarding the mixed class of different countries, if I understood well. Mm-hmm. This means that the European participants will mix with participants from all over the world. Is that correct? Just to understand, how does it work in terms of timing of hours? I mean, if I have a class with the USA, I'm in Italy, someone is connected in the morning, but it's afternoon and at the other part. And second, as you talk about a very intense program, for those who work full-time on another job, in percentage, also to explain this to our teams and boss and whoever has to, we have to share this information with. How much time do you experience in a month or a day, in a week? What percentage of time should we put aside for the coaching learning sessions? Thanks.
Okay, Irina, great question. So I would say although we last year we did have, or this year should I say, we have got a couple of people from the US and people outside our time zone, but that was because I think of COVID. They started in South Africa and then they had to go home, so off they went. And so then they stayed on. What we've seen is that the people who come to us come in this band from Europe, the UK, Africa. We're kind of in one big time zone. We don't often get people from, you know, Singapore or America, to be honest. So those are outliers. And the biggest time difference will be in the UK. So that would be Christina. At most in your winter. It's
2 hours at the moment.
Yeah, so it's 2 hours. But that's why we designed the course. You're only 1 hour difference in winter, in your winter. And in your summer, it's the same time. So Europe and South Africa are on the same time zone in your summertime, and the maximum is 1 hour. So we start at 10 o'clock here, which means it's 9 o'clock your time or 8 o'clock UK time, which is quite civilized. It just means a bit of a later in. So that's the first thing. And then to your other question around timing, I would say if you can arrange to do your coaching during working hours. So because I was so busy when I did my training, I was like the master of squeezing this in, which isn't ideal. Okay, so don't, but to give you some tips, if you can coach during your working hours, it will make your burden a lot easier, because probably the biggest segment is doing the actual coaching of, you need to coach. If you want to finish on time, I would say take 4 coachees, minimum. You have to submit 3 case studies. That means you must coach 3 people, but 1 typically drops out. So we say 4 people for about 8 sessions, 6 to 8 sessions. So if you work that out over 6 months, you probably are going to be doing at least 1 coaching session every week. If you work it out, we give you a little timetable, a little grid of suggestions. So you need to allow an hour for that. And then sort of before each reflection, the letter that you send, that one can do in kind of an evening. The case study write-ups, I would allocate a weekend for each one. And so there's 3 case studies. So I'd say there's 3 weekends. But it's very doable. Most of our students are actually in their corporate careers, full on, you know, often like really busy people. And they often, you know, everyone can fit it in. If you can't, we do allow an extension after session 3 on the written work, where then you just graduate later. So if something happens and you need to, you're allowed an extra 3 to 6 months time so that you can go and write up your cases properly.
Thank you.
Okay. I know Petsile has to go. I thought I saw another question. Oh, here we go. Oh, that's Petsile. Right. Yes, 3 full days. And please don't put anything else in your day. Don't have a lunchtime meeting or whatever. You're going to be, we make it reasonable, but it is intense. So you want to have just for you. Sorry, was someone speaking? Okay. So the question was, do we need 3 full days? Yes. So from the start time till the end time, don't put anything else in there. Pretend you're actually physically at the session. What else? Anything else? We're nearing the end of our time. We know it's late. We so appreciate you all still online. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, sometimes people think they can come and kind of do something else while they're online, but it doesn't work like that. You're going to be engaging with 1 or 2 people and very active. It's not the kind of course where you can listen in and do something on the side, which I know a few people have been caught out on that one. Discovered it too late. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, we do hope to see all of you next year, but if not, at least some of you. And if not this year, then the following, or next year, then the one after that. So, oh, good question. Who selects the people we coach? You do. Will you receive the dates before? The dates are on the brochure of two sets of dates you can select from for, you see the stream, class 1 or class 2. So if you have a look at that one, Nadia, you should receive that. Is the recording available for today? I'm sure. Nico, you're recording it, hey? He can send you the link. Yes, Nico will send us a link. Rolani, just send in your request to Nico, and then, or maybe Nico, if you want to send it to everyone who came on the course, maybe on this thing. Last flurry of questions.
Yeah, the lectures are all recorded. Even your live coaching, because you coach live online as well. So that's recorded as well. It's a wonderful way of actually seeing yourself as other people see you, which we don't often get to do. So, yeah.
Well, just saying, you record your own coaching. We don't see it. You record it in your breakout room, and it's confidential to you. So whenever you're in your private room, you can choose to record. As Craig said, that's one of the best learning tools. You record your coaching and you watch yourself. Yes, it's quite something. When will we get feedback of acceptance? Malebo, as soon as, probably, well, at this early stage, because we still have openings and we're not on the waiting list stage, then as soon as you've done all the paperwork, so Nico will be in touch with you, Malebo, to sort that one out. Okay, good. Zanele, okay. Nice to see you again.
So from my side, wonderful to meet with all of you, even in this this crazy new way that the world is being. But we would find it a privilege to work with you over the period. So good luck with your decision. If we can help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
That it was useful. Bye.
Okay. I think that's it.
That's everyone.
That went well.
Yeah, 17 people showed up, and just 20 people registered for the 21 people registered, and 17 showed up. So that's good.
I don't know where we know Zanele from, but I know Zanele.
So she possibly from one of the corporate programs, or possibly a
it might have been
guest client. Is this a guest client?
Yeah, I better try, just pass the word along to Bianca and Nicolette. Let's try and work out where she, because I totally recognize her, but Petsilia also recognized her. So maybe ask her where Petsilia knows her from. I'm like, ooh, it's always embarrassing when you can't work out. But that was great. That went well. Thanks. I liked your new way, Craig. I thought that went nicely.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, we still got a long time. I mean, there's usually it's only in March. We're going to be oversubscribed. We may have to start a new one in the middle of the year. But
Yeah,
let's worry
fine.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
We were
fine.
thinking if we have 2 sets of 40 students, you know, I don't know that we can manage more than 40 in a group.
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
With 40, we have 10 faculty. We have,
It's 50 plus you and Craig is 52. Me.
Yeah, it's big. It's big.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
All right,
Well then,
everybody.
guys. All
Good
right.
night. We'll speak
Thanks,
tomorrow.
Nico.
Okay.
And we'll speak soon.
Yes.
All
Yes. Okay. We'll catch up tomorrow morning then. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Cheers, hey.
Bye.
Bye.